Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. Tonight, I want to talk to you about multiple subjects, primarily the recent attack that happened from Hezbollah with ballistic missiles and UAVs landing in Tel Aviv, central Israel, and other parts of Israel, and causing a lot of damage. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the increased escalation coming from the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, in North Gaza, and in Gaza City too. And I also wanted to talk to you about senior figures in the Israeli military establishment talking about the mistake that they made with Hezbollah, and finally a surprising revelation coming about a participation of Turkey in the negotiations, with a recent report of a visit coming from the Israeli Shabak to Turkey. That's after Turkey advised that they cut ties with Israel. I'm going to start off, of course, with this. We had an attack coming from Hezbollah, ballistic missiles and UAVs on central Israel. I don't know why it said in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. The man was speaking a couple of words in Hebrew. However, this was the landing in Tel Aviv, and we have a couple of more videos coming up, which I'll share with you in a sec. So serious damage happening after this landing coming from Hezbollah on central Israel. Israel is also reporting that many are wounded now. Initial reports said several were also killed. And we have significant damage when it comes to Israel. I mean, this is one of the images that we saw. Again, a destroyed building completely. So the missiles actually landed inside of Tel Aviv, and there are reports about other landings. This was one of the most significant landings, by the way, so far. And it looks like we've had other locations where there were landings, and there are also confirmations about wounded individuals inside of Israel. And this was the moment of explosion. Now, Hezbollah declared that they conducted an operation with ballistic missiles on central Israel and on the other parts as well, in what was described as the most intense attack so far that we've had from Hezbollah on central Israel. And yesterday we were speaking about the fact that every day we have records being broken by Hezbollah. You have the biggest attack, then followed by the biggest attack again. Days in a row, day after day, you have multiple attacks coming in. It initially started with the north, then stretched down to Haifa, and now it's in central Israel in Tel-AVIV. Hezbollah targeted the most important bases inside of Israel and the most important strategic location called the Kiryat several times, with images and footage that was released confirming that they targeted them. When is this happening? This is happening with the increased talks coming from Lebanon about the potential reach for a ceasefire. Amos Hochstein is due to visit Beirut in a few days, and we heard that Hezbollah now handed back their comments on the draft proposal coming from the United States administration for a ceasefire in Lebanon, between Lebanon and Israel, with several comments. The details of this response, what were the comments? We don't know any of that. We don't know any of that. As a matter of fact, these are just reports coming out. And again, with this actual ceasefire proposal, Israel simultaneously escalating with Hezbollah too. Yesterday, they assassinated their spokesperson, who is a media personality and isn't a combatant. And we spoke about it in much detail yesterday. So what are Hezbollah sending? They're sending a message to Israel and to the United States administration that they're not really waiting for their proposals. They know what to expect by now. The United States administration and Israel are looking to propose a submission agreement coming from Hezbollah that would allow Israel more freedom of movement and more freedom of war crimes. When you say freedom of movement of Israel, more freedom to commit crimes in Lebanon, even with the UN Resolution 1701 that took place following the ceasefire after the 2006 war, because Israel initially tried to implement a new agreement that would have been more to the favor of Israel than before. However, they failed. And when they failed, talks started emerging back again about the 1701 again, but this time being enforced more thoroughly when it comes to Lebanon. Now, Hezbollah also released videos of them launching the missiles with the biggest attack on Haifa today, with a massive attack that happened, and they'll most likely publish footage of their attack today on Tel Aviv tomorrow or the day after that we can share with you. However, this is coming simultaneously with reports from Israel. What are these reports talking about exactly? The reports are talking about a man from the leading figures in the Israeli army, and I'll share all of the details with you shortly, talking about the fact that they made a mistake when it comes to Hezbollah. They underestimated the capabilities of Hezbollah, and they shouldn't have really conducted what they have when it comes to Hezbollah. He spoke just after the recent escalations that happened, and now he's showing remorse, saying, I made a mistake. I made a mistake when it comes to Hezbollah. And this article was published in a couple of Israeli websites, and I'll share some of the details of it with you. So it was this man. This man, Major General Israel Ziv, strikes for sin. I made a big mistake. He made a big mistake. Major General Israel Ziv admitted in an interview to Call High Radio that he was wrong regarding the system against Hezbollah in the north. I pushed to go to Lebanon. I pushed to go to the series in Lebanon, they were saying it, or the escalation in Lebanon. I made a big mistake. I didn't really understand the very significant scope of the preparations they made for their so-called operation for the occupation of the Galilee. And what we find there today in the field is psychological or massive. The maneuvering there right now is very important, he admitted. Organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, even if you destroy a large part of their leadership, they have roots planted in the ground, and it is difficult to destroy them completely. Hamas has a strong card in its hand, the abductees, and they will not give up easily. So more figures are now confirming that they're making a mistake, or that they have made a mistake when it comes to Hezbollah. And now it's not just only him. Now we have talks again coming from senior Israeli leadership involved in the negotiations, talking about the fact that Israel needs to change course when it comes to the ceasefire. And this came as a report confirming that certain figures from inside of Israel are visiting Turkey. Turkey just announced that they cut ties with Israel. However, clearly that doesn't mean, unless this happened before, they officially cut the ties, because we haven't had a specific date, if I'm not mistaken. Well, in recent days, they're saying. So it could be potentially before Turkey cut ties or after. However, even if it's after they cut ties, you know, there's still possibility that they can have certain negotiations if we're talking about a ceasefire. So we had this report in the Israeli newspaper, Ma'ariv, that mentioned this. What did the Shin Bet chief do in Turkey? All the details about the extraordinary report. Extraordinary report, meaning no one really anticipated that. Renbar and Ibrahim Kalin discussed the efforts to restart negotiations on the hostage deal and the possibility of Turkish aid. In recent days, a number of senior Hamas officials left Qatar and flew to Turkey. Again, that report hasn't really been confirmed. Although Blinken said that, Anthony Blinken said that Qatar closed the offices of Hamas in Qatar. Qatar denied. But we're having more people talking about the fact that now the senior figures of Hamas are no longer in Qatar. They have other places to go to. One of those places is Turkey. Other proposals were Algeria or Tunisia or even Iran or Iraq. But again, there is no official confirmation regarding that, but this is reported here in Israel. And they stated another channel for promoting negotiations for the release of the abductees. Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar visited Turkey in recent days and met with the head of the Turkish informant to promote a move for the abductee deal. The Shin Bet refused to comment on the matter. Then they're saying that this is happening despite the tensions between Israel and Turkey. And they're also mentioning here that, of course, Turkey has a lot of senior figures of Hamas. They added something very important that I wanted to share with you in this report. They said the head of the Shin Bet, listen to this, and the head of the Mossad, the chief of staff, and the head of the IDF abductees headquarters said during a discussion that Hamas does not agree to withdraw from its demand to end the war and the withdrawal for the IDF of Gaza Strip. So Hamas won't reach a ceasefire unless Israel completely ends the war and withdraws completely from the Gaza Strip. And withdrawing from the Gaza Strip means full withdrawal, no remaining in the axis of Netzarim or in the Philadelphia corridor, or have delusions about establishing settlements in Gaza. And they said this: if the government is interested in a deal to release the abductees, a rethinking of Israel's position on the matter is required. What are they saying? It's impossible to reach a ceasefire with the current formula, and we need to submit to the demands of Hamas. This is what they're saying. And who's saying that? Well, everyone, every top figure in the Israeli government and establishment, security establishment, intel, who are engaged in the negotiations. Everyone concerned with the war and the negotiations, they're saying that. Of course, on the other side, you have the political allies of Benjamin Netanyahu actually want to escalate. But everyone who's actually running the show when it comes to the negotiations are telling him, well, Israel needs to rethink. It's not the first time they said that. They said it before, that we need to rethink, we need to change ways. We have a deal in front of us. All of them pushed Netanyahu to reach a deal once. There were multiple reports in Israel that the whole delegation agreed to a deal, and it was only Netanyahu who refused, always sticking sticks in the wheel, adding more conditions and making it impossible to reach a ceasefire. Will Netanyahu listen this time? He hasn't listened ever before. But Israel is losing badly. I mean, Israel is suffering tremendous losses. And look, I always repeat, someone will come and tell you, how can you say that Israel is losing or Israel is being defeated when they've done so much damage and so much destruction and killed so many people? They're doing all of this damage, killing all of these people and committing a genocide and the worst crimes in history to cover up the fact that they are failing. Why? Because they are still facing resistance in Gaza and they're still facing resistance in Lebanon, and it's only increasing now. That's, of course, apart from the Yemeni front, Iraqi front, and the pending response from Iran. And we're only talking about the military here. We're not talking about anything else, like the failed state, the failed society now, split society, problems with the judicial system, internal problems, attempts to assassinate Benjamin Netanyahu internally, brink of civil war, failed state. This is what it is. Economic collapse, failed state. That's why, and always remember that, they always commit the crimes and increase the crimes against the civilian and against the civilian infrastructure to cover up the military failure. Why? They have 4 objectives. Eliminate Hamas, make Gaza not pose a threat again, return the abductees or prisoners of war home, and return the people back to the north who had to leave due to the attacks of Hezbollah. Have they achieved anything? 1 year on, 1 year, 1 month, and 11 days on? No. What does that mean? Failure. And if they submit to the demands of Hamas and Hezbollah, that means they failed massively. And that means it's a tremendous victory, both for Gaza and for Lebanon. It's difficult for some people to stomach that, but please let it sink in very well. With all of the destruction and with all of that, it's a massive victory. For Palestine, it's a massive victory. For Lebanon, it's a massive victory for every free person and a champion of human rights across the world. It's a victory for all of them. And how are they facing this increased resistance? Well, it's not stopping, is it? I mean, a couple of days ago, I posted a few videos coming from Gaza, and we're told that it's the end and Israel's almost done, and of course there are atrocities happening, absolutely, but they're still facing problems. They're still being attacked day after day. And if they're being attacked day after day, and these attacks are increasing, well, what does that tell you? That tells you that they're failing against the people who they should be beating, right? Or defeating. However, that's not happening. And this is an example. I'm going to share this with you here. So if you look at this video, the Palestinian armed resistance, they published this today. Firstly, they're still digging. These people are digging tunnels. Israel said they destroyed all of the tunnels. This is in Burej refugee camp. So the Palestinians are still digging more and more tunnels, expanding the tunnels. This is something that also happened in previous wars. The Yahya Sinwar at the time, he said after the escalation 3-4 years ago that the people were digging tunnels 13, 14, 15 hours a day. And even when they were asked to go and have a rest, they were like, we don't want to have a break. We have work to do. And that's still the case now. And this means that even if Israel, and they definitely haven't, found some tunnels in Gaza, they're going to face more tunnels that they did not even know about. And they don't know about over 90% of the tunnels, at least in Gaza. Most of what they found are tunnels that they should have found or were lured into them by the Palestinian resistance. But they published today these attacks coming from Gaza. Here they targeted a D9 bulldozer destroying homes of civilians. In many cases with people inside them, by the way. There was a statement coming from one of the genocide soldiers. He comes on mainstream media, these genocide soldiers, by the way. And they have followers online too, by the way, hailing them. He said he felt trauma after he ran over so many bodies. He ran over hundreds of Palestinian people's bodies. And it was difficult to see the scenes and the after effects. So he's traumatized. And the CNN and Fox News and mainstream media, they want us to sympathize with him. This is what these D9 bulldozers do. This is a Merkava tank, by the way. The first two were D9 bulldozers. This is a Merkava tank. And here they're pulling the destroyed Merkava tanks. The destroyed Merkava tanks after they targeted them, of course. And they also released videos of them targeting or sniping, to be more accurate, genocide soldiers inside of Gaza. 5 snipers taking them down one by one. And I won't share it here just in case it's a little bit too much for this platform. And again, what does that tell you? I mean, this says that, again, the campaign is a failure. What we're being told, again, in mainstream media and what Israel is declaring are massive lies. And again, the levels of destruction and the levels of crimes against the innocent civilians, you know, that are beyond the comprehension of any human being, by the way. Unless you go there, you'll really understand. Although, you know, we share images regularly and what have you, and I share them on other platforms too. They're doing all of that just to instill the spirit of defeat in people, to kill people's spirits. Why? To tell them that basically it's not worth it to stand up against us. It isn't worth it to say no to us. It's not worth it to try and resist. And you need to accept the fact that we are your masters and you're our slaves. And of course, you know, you will have some people arguing Like, well, yeah, indeed, they did destroy so much, and what's left of Gaza? You know, all of this suffering, and what's going to happen? And to that, I would say is the first and most important thing: look at history. Look at all nations from all across the world. By the way, whether it's from East Asia, Africa, Latin America, all parts of the world, really, who worked or struggled for independence and struggled for rights. None of their movements came without sacrifices. And in many cases, sacrifices in terms of numbers, much bigger than the Palestinian case. Mm-hmm. In Algeria, millions. Vietnam, millions. And in several years, by the way, Vietnam, when you talk about Vietnam, alongside many other examples too. And all of these things indicate that for a great move in history to happen, it would require a lot of sacrifice. And usually evil empires or evil powers, when they are about to collapse, they show their ugliest possible side, and they resort to the most heinous crimes possible. Now, some of them more than others, by the way, But in the case of Israel, because they were established on all of these deep-rooted evil things like ethnic cleansing, mass killing, massacres against population, starvation, expelling people, destruction, not once, not twice, but more, and a regular implementation of a regime of supremacy, of religious and ethnic supremacy and oppression and occupation. And now we're witnessing the most barbaric crime of the 21st century happening in front of us. So they're doing all of that to instill defeat. However, they're doing all of that to cover up what is actually happening on the ground. What's actually happening is what you're seeing. The resistance is escalating in Gaza against Israel in the most hardly hit areas. Jabalia and Gaza City and Al Bureij refugee camp. All of them have been hit so much, especially Jabalia recently. But all of Gaza has been hit, including what Israel labeled as safe zones. They tell the people to go to one place and they'll target them there. How many schools housing refugees have they targeted? And people were exploded into bits in Gaza. And again, if any of you are interested in viewing, I share some of the things that come on my X account, by the way, alongside many others, of course. And there are dedicated accounts, by the way, who share all of the updates. Mind you, it's not for the faint-hearted. But they're doing all of that to cover up this, to cover this up, and to cover what's happening internally. And what's surprising is the fact that we're not getting the level of coverage even about the internal dissatisfaction and disapproval of the Israeli public, of their prime minister and the government, and the constant protests and the attempts to kill him, and the divisions inside of the establishment politically, the divisions militarily. They don't talk about them. Why? Because to them, they want to portray Israel as a normal democratic state, not as a genocidal, supremacist, pariah terror state. And why do they also cover that up too? It's because they're complicit in their crimes. Mainstream media and the many Western establishments, they are just as complicit as Israel. So they don't want to show the crimes. They would have rather, you don't see what's actually happening in Gaza, that Israel can get away with their crimes like they used to do it previously in their previous barbaric wars, in their colonialism, in their mass enslavement, in their murder of millions of people. The people or the countries supporting Israel are countries, by the way, some of them have committed far bigger genocides than Israel. And that's why they're trying to cover up what's happening to this day. And these were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about in this video. Things are very tense. There is a prospect of a ceasefire, or at least there are reports of a prospect of a ceasefire, but that's not looking likely. It's not looking like it's going to happen. And in the meantime, we're seeing more escalation from the resistance in Gaza and in Lebanon. And let me open the space up for you for the community. Check if you have any questions or comments. By the way, if you have any questions for me, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them. And welcome again, everyone, to another live stream. And Amra, thank you so much. John H., Western MSM has blood of millions on their lying hands. They do. They do. And the media war, in many cases, by the way, is more important than what happens on the ground. Why? Because it justifies it. It justifies it. It brainwashes people to believe certain other people are below them, or they are X or Z. Therefore, they deserve mass killing. And when they cover up the crimes, also, you're part of the crime. When you deny the crime, how many genocide deniers we have in the West? How many genocide denying heads of state do we have? The US, the UK, Germany. Oh, Germany said no, they need to kill more civilians because Hamas uses civilians. They haven't changed really since Hitler. And it's exceptionally important. That's why it's always important to raise awareness and constantly remain active when it comes to the media. And now with the alternative media, really, so social media, because it shapes opinion as well. It's no longer the traditional mainstream media that shapes opinion. And that's why, despite many attempts to censor the voices going up against these crimes on social media, even that failed. Ram plans. I saw today that Israel is building heavy-duty buildings in Gaza with heavy tank walls. It seems like they will stay there until 2026. They're not leaving. They don't plan on leaving. They're not planning to leave. They're planning to settle in Gaza. Their population, or some of the Israeli population, are waiting to start building properties over the bodies and skeletons of butchered children in this genocide. Because over 10,000 bodies haven't been found in Gaza. Don't forget that. And they don't mind. This is how they built their state. So they want to repeat it again in Gaza. But like the report that I spoke with you about earlier on, the head of the Shabak and the head of the Mossad and the IDF chief of staff, all of them are saying that Hamas are refusing our presence there and for us not to end the war. And if Israel does want to reach a solution, that it needs to change the way it thinks. What does that tell you? Well, that tells you that they're not going to succeed. We're witnessing the end of Israel. Let no one be delusional. This is the end. And the end, again, doesn't have to be 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 weeks or 1 or 2 months. It can take years, but this is the end. They have been always buying time, but this time they're not even interested in buying time. Netanyahu is not interested in buying time. You would have thought he would de-escalate at one point, get a breather, stop all of this talk, globally. You've had a year of exposure. That's terrible. They usually thrive in the dark. They commit crimes in the dark. Only those who observe and monitor, they see. But the general population, complacent, massive ignorance. But now even people who are not interested are like digging in. And that's not good for Israel. Netanyahu hasn't done that. There are no indications that he is going to do that. So he's going to go down and he's going to take his genocidal entity with him. And we're witnessing it. And Chocolate Pudding, thank you so much. You said, is this the final war? And if not, then how does this end? I think this is the final war. And thank you again. I think this is the final war. I think it began on the 7th of October. You know, Israel had better ways to deal with it. It had other ways that could have been potentially better for Israel overall in the short and medium terms as well, because they were bound to end at one point. But, you know, it's as if they are, you know, rushing to destroy themselves. But it is, I think it is. Even if you come and reach, for example, a ceasefire, it's still the final war. Why? Because the ceasefire will break and you will have some other escalations. And a ceasefire will not guarantee stability, by the way. Ceasefire, then the wars, the massive wars will begin internally in Israel about all of the damage, all of the destruction, all of the people that died for nothing. Look, the same guy who I shared this article, and I had another link for his article, but it wasn't working at the time. I'm going to try it again. The Major General, Israel Ziv, who said, I made a big mistake. He said in another article, what he said is the level of losses that we are getting every single month are like beyond comprehension. And he was only referring to Lebanon. The levels of losses are beyond comprehension when it comes to Lebanon. Why would he say that? Why would he say that the losses are beyond comprehension and we can't tolerate them? You have 5 divisions in Lebanon, over 60,000 troops, and you claim that you only lost hundreds. If you lost several hundred in Lebanon in the past month, then why are you in such a bad situation? You still have over 60,000. So you're supposed to be fine. Even if you lose 10,000, you're supposed to be fine. What does that mean? Did they lose more than that? Did they lose tens of thousands? Or in terms of injured? Or Hezbollah confirmed officially that they wounded over 1,000 and killed over 100. But that's what Hezbollah only monitored and verified. So if he's saying that we can't take it, why can't you take it then? If you have 60,000 people on the border with Lebanon, losing 1,000 or 2, not a big deal, right? If you're on this all-out war and we want to change everything and clearly the numbers are far bigger than what we're being told. Likewise in Gaza. In Gaza, of course, it's way more than Lebanon. And now they're, of course, sending their genocide soldiers for the slaughterhouse in Lebanon too. Again, self-destruction. How else can you translate that? How else can you translate that? If anyone had an ounce of common sense and they were attacked, and their attacker is saying, I'm willing to stop the attack, but we need to reach an agreement. And it was initially a prisoner exchange. Well, speak first and then deal with them. Why? Because you had people being kidnapped. Israel immediately went on a massive bombardment campaign in Gaza. Immediately. How can anyone who cares about his own residents do that? You're the leader of a country. 280 people, your residents, were kidnapped. You couldn't care less about the other people. Of course, it's a problem, and it's hitting him back hard. But let's say, he claims he doesn't care about it, and he cares about the Israeli people. No, you don't care about the Israeli people too. If you cared about the Israeli people, how can you go and carpet bomb a place where they can be anywhere? And that resulted to Israel killing over 50 of its own citizens in the first month in Gaza, who are kidnapped to Gaza. So they're prisoners of war. That's apart from the 7th of October massacres, by the way. Them shooting the Nova Festival revelers, shooting everything going back to Gaza, including their citizens, their tanks shelling at the houses in Kibbutz Be'eri and the other kibbutzes too, confirmed by Israelis who had these statements. And then, of course, the censorship started to ramp up. So he doesn't care, and all of these actions being taken by a prime minister indicate that he has a psychopathic, narcissistic personality. He is completely detached from the damage that he is inflicting upon his own people about anything surrounding him. He's detached emotionally from him, egocentric, self-centered, with the delusions of grandeur, thinking that he is the great savior. So I believe this is the final war. I believe we're witnessing the end of Zionism. It should have ended a long time ago, and it should have been made illegal a long time ago. It's an ideology based on terror, and hails mass terror, and hails genocide and ethnic cleansing, and promotes supremacy. And they commit acts of terror all across the world. But we are witnessing their end, and it again, it can take time. It's not like a case of 1 or 2 days. I'm sure most people like, when is this going to end, and when is that going to end? Of course, everyone wants to see this end, and the suffering ends, and at least a ceasefire, so people can breathe and eat, and have a bit of basic stuff that they deserve in life. But it doesn't appear that way. It does not appear that way, and the man is only escalating. Abdi Sadiq, Iran to get nukes before Trump becomes president again. Well, it looks like, what's his name, Biden. It looks like Biden is keen on having World War III. Now he's allowing the comedian puppet genocide supporting Zelensky to attack Russia with ballistic missiles, US-made ballistic missiles. So what do you think, Putin's going to sit down like that and not do anything? What's wrong with these people? He knows that Trump is going to take certain actions against Zelensky, but from an Iranian perspective and the situation in West Asia, they don't care which president comes. And really, he should be insignificant. The United States president and all of these Western genocide supporting leaders, they shouldn't be relevant to the other parts of the world. But they still have the arrogant colonial mentality, thinking that they can stick their noses everywhere they please at the expense of the slaughter of the innocent people inside these territories. But with the expelling of Israel from the region, you're expelling the last Western neo-colonial entity in the region. So Israel is the Western establishment's barking and biting dog in the region that tries to kill everything in its way, to try and scare other people. And they're sitting in the back acting like, they're against this, and, we don't know, and we're not sure, and we're concerned, and, this does not qualify to a genocide, and all of this garbage. Because they're complicit, and Israel is them, and they are Israel. Because there's the same thing. Israel represents their values. Israel represents the Western colonial values. This is what they represent. Occupation, stealing, land grabbing, mass murder, enslavement, everything you like. Why? Because we deserve it. Because we're better than them. So again, simultaneously with what's happening in Gaza now, and of course before that in Ukraine, you're seeing also the emergence of a multipolar world. It's not just the collapse of the state of Israel and the death of Zionism. Iran, they could potentially have nukes already. I mean, what's the problem in them having nukes? Who's arguing with Iran about having nukes? The US? You have 6,000 warheads. Who? The UK? You spend, how many trillions you spend instead of spending them on your people, starving your people and collapsing the economy? Other European countries, who has the audacity to say a word to Iran about obtaining nuclear? They can have nuclear weapons if they want. What's the problem? Nuclear weapons are ugly. Wars are ugly, you know. We can reach a day as human beings. We have the capacity to end wars and deal with things diplomatically. But, you know, generally people choose not to because of primarily greed and control and power purposes. But so long as this is how the world's run, and the world is run like that, the world is run by power and by force, then every country is entitled to receive or gain or strive to gain as much force as it can. To protect itself, by the way, from the terrorists who actually used nukes against innocent civilians and who still does justify it, by the way. Some people in the United States establishment still justify the horrible attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki that they're still suffering from to this day. This is why, you know, I'm saying that some of these people in the Western establishments, they have the same mentality as Israel and the leaders of Israel. So they probably have nukes already. You know, they officially don't. There's officially like a religious fatwa from the supreme leader saying we can't. But, you know, people in parliament now are asking him to revise that based on the current situation. They could have had a nuclear bomb from the days of the collapse of the Soviet Union. It was being sold. And there were also reports that they could have a nuclear bomb at their disposal from Russia and North Korea if they need it. That doesn't necessarily have to be in Iran, by the way, but they can use it if they want. And they also responded to a threat coming from Western leaders to them that Israel will attack you with a nuclear bomb if you attack it, saying that we will respond with the same manner. Are they entitled to do that? Of course they are. So long as the world is run by force, well, everyone is allowed to use it, right? Because it's run by it. Are we run by international law? We're not. If international law was implemented, great. Things would have been better for everyone. Less bloodshed because things would have been implemented equally. It's not the case. And so long as that's not the case and the world is run by massive terrorists, then you need to protect yourself, including Iran. Mustafa Salam Mahmoud, the reason why I always follow you because what I watch on TV is always different from what you show. Zionists claim the fire in Tel-Aviv was due to interception, not directed. Salam and thank you. And that's why I post videos every day, because you have lies every day and there are reasons to be here every single day. Even if an innocent person is hit in an unjust manner, there's a reason to speak about it so that people can know. And again, even if you stay here, if I stay here 24/7, it's not enough to portray the level of what's happening. But you said they claimed that the fire was due to interception. They actually admitted that it was a landing, by the way. The Israeli police said, you might have seen the initial reports, but later the Israeli police confirmed that this was not an interception. This was a missile landing, and they couldn't deny it. A building was destroyed. If a building was destroyed, then how can you deny or say that it's an interception? With an interception, the body of the missile lands, no warhead, no nothing. You know, worst thing, it'll break something, or, you know, unless it lands on something sensitive. So they did admit that it was actually a missile and that the interception failed. And these confirmations came from Israel itself. Studio Rainer, let me try and share some of your comments here on the screen. Yeah, here we are. Thank you. You said, I feel bad for the Israeli youth. What Israel is hiding is an example of a subverted religion taught at birth. We will see, is the equal of the Holocaust spread throughout time. The nation who needs to be judged is Britain. Well, yeah, there's indoctrination and mass manipulation from a young age, indoctrination to be more specific. There's a lot of talk about the victimhood, about the fact that we came to barren land, land without people, to people without a land. They, of course, publish the pseudo-history to the Israeli population. They mostly have Jewish schools for the Jews, and other communities have other schools too. And we are seeing something worse than the Holocaust happening, and yet they're denying it. Those who blame people and constantly bang on about the victimhood of the Holocaust, and others will sympathize with the Holocaust they haven't seen and deny a genocide being live streamed. And the nation that needs to be judged is Britain. The people who made the decisions are certain individuals in the British establishment. So you wouldn't say the whole nation. And Britain, the British Empire, indeed started the problem with the Balfour Declaration. And that's why Britain is still in denial. The British establishment is still in denial. Why? Because it's complicit. The British establishment is rotten to the core, genocidal to the core. And they are mass terrorists who are very supremacist and have neo-colonial approaches like the people leading Israel. But it's hard for the British establishment to look in the mirror and have some self-reflection. Although, ironically, King Charles is going to other nations apologizing for the slavery times and what have you. You have a genocide happening in front of you. Isn't that a priority? Stop the genocide. Stop supporting it. Stop denying it. What's with this hypocrisy? And you have a man like Keir Starmer, or Kid Starver, the crime sinister in Britain, denying that it's a genocide. Do you understand what I mean? They're that evil. And at one point, when Israel vanishes, they will deny that they said anything. Because someone like Starmer himself, he's now denying what he said in the beginning of the war, the massive liar. And he's a human rights lawyer by profession, Kid Starver. A human rights lawyer. He, in the beginning of the war, he justified Israel's complete siege over Gaza. Absolute siege. No food, no water, no nothing. Yes, Israel has a right to do that because of what it's facing. Basically, what is he saying? Israel has the right to starve 2.3 million people to death and not give them basic needs and not give them basic capital punishment. These people are dangerous. The murderers are sitting in the government. These are the mass murderers, the mass terrorists. They're sitting in the government. Do you understand? And I think many people are naive to these facts. But again, at one point, when Israel ceases to exist, as it is now, they will try and deny. Like they now, look at, apartheid South Africa as if, Don't forget, they used to imprison people who used to sympathize with Nelson Mandela, right? And the struggle to end apartheid. They used to support apartheid. And nothing changed. They still do. It's just that they play based on what's suitable. Tayyib, salam from the Netherlands. Salam, my friend. Do you think Hezb, Russian, Chinese, North Korean, Hezb has these missiles from Russia, China, North Korea? Russian, yeah. They manufacture. Iran, yeah. North Korea, well, there's North Korean and Chinese weapons in Gaza. Hezbollah might have some of them, but they use a lot of Russian weapons or ex-Soviet weapons too, and they manufacture. And they have capacity. And like I said, what Israel is doing in Lebanon is not stopping any of that. Perceived reality, Mahmoud. Israel hit Italian UNIFIL bases in Lebanon. What are your thoughts? Arrest Netanyahu, arrest Biden, arrest Bush, kick him in the bush, and free Palestine. Well, all I can say is that just imagine it was the opposite. Imagine everything you're seeing now is the opposite to Western powers and Western mainstream media. Imagine Palestinians had an army, not like armed movements, right? They had an army, and this army started to bomb Israel indiscriminately, slaughtering Israeli women and children in hospitals, and burning people and literally beheading them and decapitating them. And targeting UN bases and targeting human rights organizations and targeting people who are totally not linked with anything to do with the fighting against them. Imagine that. If the Palestinian side had a state and they committed 0.1% of what this child murdering depraved entity did, they would have had a regime change, and the NATO and all of the Western armies would have gone there to force a regime change. But when it comes to their supremacist, racist, little neo-colonial state, they don't do anything. They don't listen to anything with international law. Isn't that a concern? They don't comply with UN resolutions. Isn't that a concern? But hey, it's being vetoed. Every action against them is being vetoed by who? By the master of the Western powers, the United States establishment. You know, as if Europe has independence. What, are we joking? Hardly any European state has any independence from the United States post-World War II and the Marshall Plan, and they hold them like that. And there are people in Europe who, of course, are aware of that. And there are many people in the United States who are aware of how corrupt and totally supportive of Israel their government is, and how it's eaten from the inside. Do you know what I mean? So, again, you wouldn't even hear it in many cases. You wouldn't see that Israel is targeting the UNIFIL and targeting them. Israel killed the United States civilians providing aid. They killed British citizens providing aid. Did you hear a condemnation from Britain and the US? One condemnation. They didn't hear. No condemnation. No, it's terror. No, nothing. Shows you who they are. That's what it shows you. Who they are and how complicit they are. Bujar IRGC Aerospace Force General Shakian, no request has been sent to Russia for the S-400 system because the systems we have possesses capabilities far superior to those of the S-400. If he's referring to the Bavar 737, then it's close to the S-400, it is. But I mean, I'm sure if they would have the opportunity to, if they need to, they could potentially have them. You know, I published the slip the other day of one of their figures saying that, oh, you know, we have the S-400. And then he said, no. Some people said that like it's a Freudian slip. But clearly their systems have been extremely effective against Israel's most advanced fighter jets. F-35, F-16. They couldn't do anything. Okay. Tam, Mahmoud, do you think Netanyahu will take responsibility for what happened on October the 7th? Never. Netanyahu is preventing a state investigation, a state inquiry. But in Israel, by the way, private families already started an inquiry, but it's private. On behalf of over 40 families, they recruited, they hired some of the biggest names in the Israeli legal systems, of the biggest solicitors and lawyers, and that has been ongoing. Now, with regards to the actual investigation, I don't believe you will ever see a genuine investigation in Israel, because it would strip everyone. It would make everyone totally naked to the truth, and I don't believe they will do that genuinely. But what they will try and do is have these mini investigations that would, take away some of the tension from the public, show that there's some flaws coming from the state, but not to the true extent whatsoever, never from Benjamin Netanyahu's side too, because he's complicit, because he knew, and because many knew that something was about to happen. You had some of Israel's largest banks shorting, right, stocks, making hundreds of millions in profit that were unusual. It was suspicious. It was called Bank Leumi who did that. They made hundreds of millions. Then several in the Israeli army said that we notified our commanders that something suspicious was happening in Gaza. Then IDF said, figures from the IDF said the other day, and I spoke about it at the time, that Benjamin Netanyahu's office knew 4 hours before. But Benjamin Netanyahu denied that. So, because, it will show everything. It's like saying the United States will investigate 9/11. Not going to happen. Why? Because they did it. Of course, with the 7th of October, it's not 9/11. And Israel didn't do it. Israel just had prior knowledge, and they could have prevented it. And HS, thank you so much, my friend. And Studio Rainer again. Before Studio Rainer, just 1 second. Studio Rainer. You're saying Zionist equals British political banter, that only after World War II did it evolve into a revenge cult. Russia is the only nation who states the enemy. It's not Israel or the US. It's the legacy of the Rothschild dynasty. Thank you. And I mean, the Rothschild, we spoke about them many times. They have funded the state of Israel from the beginning. They gave Israel whatever it needs to be set up, and they were settled in Britain. Bujar, Mahmoud, do you think we will see all of these Western leaders and media being judged when Eastern Axis impose its hegemony? Well, see, I don't think, firstly, the Eastern Axis or the Global South will be imposing hegemony. I think what they will impose is an equally divided world power or world order, a multipolar world. I don't think China is interested in hegemony, by the way, nor Russia. The only establishments that we've seen interested in hegemony in the past century were Western countries trying to occupy the world. Now, no, I don't think everyone will be like judged. There is no absolute justice on this earth, and you will still see criminals moving around. And I think sometimes part of the reconciliation or the new page requires an understanding, right? So if you have, for example, people you've been fighting with, for example, your enemies or whatever, crimes have been committed, and there's a peaceful solution coming afterwards. Well, do you know what I mean? It's not like everyone is going to be judged like that. And don't take the Nazis as an example. The Nazis, it was a show. It was just a show as part of the post-World War II and the panic mode, the legitimization of Israel, because many of the Nazis remained in the German bureaucracy in West Germany, and many of them well served the United States in its a technological advancement, and other countries too. But I think the rise of the multipolar world, it's being enforced, like whether America likes it or not, by the way. It's not like, Iran or Russia and China and the people of West Asia and other countries are waiting for them. In Africa, look what's happening in Africa. They're kicking the French authorities, colonizers in the boots, right? And the American occupation. And look, they're uniting. When they expelled the French forces, they started uniting countries in Africa. And how ironic, with the support of China and Russia, even North Korea sometimes. It's like, what's happening? We thought that these were the bad people you're telling us. Why are they supporting Africa like with no will to colonize, right? China lifted off 50 billion in debt of African nations a few years back, helping them with infrastructure, with water, with technology. Did the French do that in Africa? Or maybe the British Empire did that in Africa. No, they go there, enslave the people, steal their riches, and go back. And internally, they act like nothing's happening across the world, They're just busy about, thinking what's politically correct internally and, how's the weather like. But I think we're going there. But no, I don't think most people, will be judged. I think some criminals will be brought to justice here, right? Here before the hereafter. But yeah, the ultimate justice is not on this earth. Jimmy Eyes, are we going to get Russia's nuclear weapons in the US even if we don't want them? Well, it depends what your president would do now. If your president, Joe Biden, is allowing his little comedian genocide-supporting puppet, Zelensky, to attack Russia with long-range ballistic missiles, then Putin could take that as direct American intervention. Wink, wink, right? Because they're already supporting them with NATO. But it could escalate. That doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily going to mean like a Russian attack on the US. Because then it's the end of the world. Well, that's it. But if anyone wants to attack the United States with a nuclear bomb, for example, not one, not two, but 3 or 4 or 10, then the United States is going to retaliate. And there's going to be a lot of destruction. I don't think it's going to reach that level, but it sure is, probable at one point. There is a likelihood. And again, the West's actions, both in Europe and across the world, have proven that they are reckless and they are warmongers. Western powers, reckless warmongers, wreaking havoc and acting arrogant with all other nations of the world. And the world population is getting sick of them. The world population is getting sick of this US empire trying to dictate everything on them, thinking they're better than them. The US empire and its proxies. So that's why things are changing. And I hope it doesn't reach that stage. And I think it's in the hands of the United States how it decides to position itself and handle the fact that it's no longer the world's only superpower dictating what happens across the world. They can decide. They either do it peacefully. Why? Because you actually have rational players in the world. You have rational players everywhere, by the way, including in Russia and in China and in Iran. Rational, you listen to them, they speak logic, they speak in a coherent manner, good terminology, good knowledge of history, openness, not a hostile approach, unlike most Western leaders who constantly spew venom and propaganda and racism against other nations. It's as if this is how they thrive. to keep their war machine going across the world and justify more war crimes. So if the US wants to take it to World War III, they can. But if they choose to accept the fact that no, we're no longer the policemen of the world, it's not the world order of the United States only, then there could be a peaceful transition. By the way, where other nations will actually get what's theirs. As in, the United States will stop stealing. The United States empire and Western colonial powers will stop actually stealing other nations and dictating what they have and what they should and what they shouldn't do, by the way. And again, all of this talk from the United States and Western leaders about this international community, it's all garbage. They don't represent the international community. The international community is against them. Even with their position with Israel, for example, they're a minority. They are an extremist, genocide-supporting minority, acting like they're the international community. What do you mean the international community? How many countries supported a ceasefire? How many countries support the establishment of a Palestinian state? Where is democracy at a global level? Don't you talk about democracy 24/7? Implement democracy in the United Nations. If most countries vote on X, then we get X. If most countries vote on Y, we get Y. Why don't you do that? Over 160 now countries recognizing a Palestinian state. But the remaining dictators, no, they don't want that. They don't like it. It's not suitable for their colonial, arrogant needs. And that's going to change. And I hope it doesn't reach a stage where, you're going to have to wage a massive war. But again, the Western powers are taking us there. They're leading us there. And Joe Public, thank you. Zionists in Netanyahu, criminally insane, totally insane. He's psychopathic and he is narcissistic and he has traits to prove that. He is detached from the harm that he is inflicting on his own people and other people too. He has all of the traits of a narcissistic psychopath. And Studio Rainer, thank you. You said, would you make a Telegram? My YT deletes messages. I can consider Telegram. Some of my followers have created an unofficial Discord, by the way. If you wouldn't mind, if Violet, our moderator, is here, if you wouldn't mind sharing it, if anyone wants to join it. Mind you, I've never been there yet, but you can join that, and it's like an unofficial page. And if I do, I will let you know. I'm active on X as well. Tori is also asking me about Russia with Chris Mahmoud. If the US attacks Russia via Ukraine, do you think Russia will destroy West Asia assets? Well, they have a lot of things that they can do. But again, like I said, they are a rational actor. If you listen to, and please, before people start to get all, I'm not endorsing anyone. I'm not endorsing Putin. I'm not supporting anyone. I'm telling you what I observe. If you listen to Putin's recent interviews and some of his speeches and compare them to Donald Trump, compare them to Joe Biden, compare them to the best spoken, most eloquent Western leader, and tell me what you think. They are not interested in escalation. Escalations are being imposed on them by the ever-expanding NATO that was supposed to be a defensive organization, and by the United States going against all of the promises to Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union, only to expand its military might in Europe. You have over 100,000 American soldiers in Europe, in hundreds of bases, in the UK, in Germany, in. They occupy the world, basically. And when they want to use a certain country to do something, they'll do it. So they have leverage. They can destroy assets in West Asia. They can increase certain things with anti-US or anti-Israel. I mean, listen, I think we're already past that. I mean, Putin had an international trip where he visited the anti-US countries, Venezuela, Cuba, Vietnam, some other countries, to strengthen these countries. And we were seeing what he's doing with Iran, of course, and his position as well in the Levant too, and also with China. And with China, it's it's less public for Chinese purposes. But he has a defense pact with North Korea, the country that is considered to be the most dangerous country on earth, right? He has a defense pact with them. So he'll defend them if they're attacked, and they defend him when he's attacked. And he has that only through China. So I don't think Russia wants the escalation, but when an escalation is imposed on you, you fight back. And that's what Russia's been doing. But I think Biden is trying to make things more difficult for Trump and make the last couple of bucks before he finishes. And also Sams is asking me about that. Do you have any comment about America's allowance using ATACMS on Russian territory? Yes, and I spoke about that yesterday. I think it's a reckless escalation. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have World War III. Well, firstly, let them arrive, and let's see if Zelensky uses them. If he does, ever since the report, you saw how much Russia is escalating all across Ukraine, including in Kiev too, in one of their biggest offensives since the beginning of the war in 2022. It was described as one of the biggest since those days. So they're sending a message like, if you want to actually start using them, then expect hell from us. Okay, let's take your last question here. Midas, thank you. You said, do you think this potential ceasefire will go through Hezbollah, Lebanon, Israel? Do you think Iran will strike Israel after any ceasefire? I personally have no faith that it will pass, simply because we still have the same people in power in Israel. It's a man who refused any sort of ceasefire, although Hamas accepted a ceasefire. Joe Biden said he accepted a ceasefire. His delegation team accepted a ceasefire. The majority of the Israeli public accepted and called and pushed for a ceasefire. Yet the prime minister is not interested. He hasn't accepted a ceasefire under tough conditions, and now he is still facing tough conditions. Not necessarily the toughest, but very tough. The losses they are facing in South Lebanon are tremendous, I'm telling you. But again, if you have someone who is clinically, okay, I mean, he hasn't been checked for it, but a narcissistic psychopath, by his actions only. If someone starts to mass murder people, kill people, not listen to anyone, has no remorse on anything wrong, he doesn't recognize anything wrong that he does, he is completely detached from reality, he doesn't care about the people who need him most in his country, the people who are harmed the most, he doesn't care about the lives of the people who he sends to die for him. He is a narcissistic psychopath leading a country. He is the most dangerous man on planet Earth now. And there are many like him across the world, but now he's actually implementing this genocide, and he's a narcissistic psychopath. So it doesn't look like he wants to reach a ceasefire. He still has his government. He sacked his defense minister, well, genocide minister to be more accurate, who was the only one applying pressure on him and acting as a pressure point in the establishment when it comes to Netanyahu. Gallant, although he's a war criminal, he's a genocidal maniac too, the same guy. But look how ironic it is, the people who are considered to be more rational Israel are also genocidal. And now he's ultimately in charge of everything. Why should he change way? He's getting the money regardless. Western leaders lick his boots. They give him everything that he wants. They give him the money. They give him the weapons. People dying, that's one of the main problems. You know, he needs more people to die for him. So long as he controls the levels of death whilst trying to add up people, fine, the bodies can pile up in Israel for the cannon fodder for him. And he'll still try and do his best to bring the Americans and the British and the Germans to go and die for him. Maybe some of them will go and die for him. So he's there, you know, the billions are coming from America. Europe is still accepting him as a legitimate leader. They're still supporting Israel. So what's the worry? What's the rush from his perspective? He doesn't care if he has criticism. He doesn't care if he has any. And again, so when you have a psychopathic person, it's not going to change anything. And it's as if it's destined to happen this way, to be fair. I mean, Israel as a state has been acting in the most irrational manner I have ever seen them in history. We know they're a genocide entity. We know they form their existence on terror and expelling, and we know what they're doing now is a true representation of their true nature, but they're not looking one day ahead. They're not seeing the damage that they're inflicting on themselves. They're not reconsidering anything. And even if you have a ceasefire tomorrow, by the way, Israel will never recover from what it's done, by the way. What do you think? People will all of a sudden forget what happened? Or that they will no longer have ambitions to kill people again? Well, of course they will. And it will end up, you know, becoming worse at some point. And that's why Western powers have a lot of blood on their hands, and they're complicit in this genocide because they're enabling it. The United States supports them with everything that they want. Britain still sends them weapons and legitimizes their genocide. Germany is telling them kill more innocent civilians. Other European establishments are allowing this to happen. What? They have blood on their hands because they're supporting. And there's a difference between the direct supporter, right, and those who you criticize for lack of action. There's a difference between them. Both of them are problems. But the bigger problem is those who are supporting. You have a genocide happening in front of your eyes in broad daylight, and you're still supporting the man. So that's why I think it will probably continue for a long time, unless something very dramatic happens, unless Netanyahu is assassinated. Look, Israelis are trying to assassinate him now. If he gets assassinated, there's a prospect of someone coming in and having a ceasefire, and then actual hot civil war being ignited in Israel to destroy it from within, because it already began the process of destruction from within. And we will see historical changes in the region. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm really sorry I haven't, reached all of your comments and questions, because you had many of them today. I tried to stretch the time of our stream a bit longer. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for everyone who participated. Thank you for so much for everyone who sent supers. Much appreciated. Midas or Midas, Joe Public, Studio Rainer, HS, Joe Public, Studio Rainer again, Chocolate Pudding, Amra, and Studio Rainer. Thank you so much, my friend. And everyone else, thank you to all of the members, subscribers, viewers, our moderator. Thank you so much. In the meantime, I'll have another shorter video after this too. And of course, if something urgent happens, I'll be back with a different video too afterwards, or another live stream. But in the meantime, if everything goes as it is, I'll be with you again tomorrow. Stay blessed, everyone. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your evening or day or night, depending on where you are. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.